Privacy protection is the centerpiece of your position. You say we must also protect medical privacy. Many of us agree. Big drug companies, hospital chains, and insurance companies are a very big lobby, and we have become the product. Our medical system is upside down. Michael Moore has a new film coming out about this in about a month. How could we possibly fix this?
It's really hard. Once government takes over the delivery of the medical care, and the people become dependent on the government, it's almost impossible. But that is the first step. And I think they're connected. Once you relinquish the responsibility of people taking care of themselves, and the government does it, then the privacy is transferred, and that is a natural consequence because they will argue efficiency, and it'll be better this way, and it helps reduce costs and all these arguments. But what it does is help increase the profits. But a lot of well-intentioned things leads to invasion of privacy. Today we had a bill which I'm sure many people, even in your listening audience, might well agree with it. It was more federal restrictions on gun ownership because of that tragedy down in Virginia City. But what they want to do is have a national data bank of everybody's medical record, find out if there was any spousal abuse, find out if there was ever any medical problems. So all this medical history and all these things are putting into this huge data bank because if you want to apply for a gun ownership, they can call that up and find out. So some people would argue, well, this is good. We got to restrict guns kill and all that argument. At the same time, once you turn that responsibility over to the government, and then the government has to invade the privacy, so you sacrifice one liberty in order to try to, take care of another problem.
Presidential power. Unlimited presidential power. Many people have complained about this with the Bush administration. The Republicans have not held this administration accountable in any way, shape, or form. That's your party. People have talked about impeachment. H.R. 333, Dennis Kucinich's bill to impeach the vice president. Are you in favor of that bill? Are you in favor of holding Bush and Cheney accountable? And would you be a co-sponsor of H.R. 333? Would you even consider that?
Probably not right now, but I'm in favor of an investigation to find out who was explicitly responsible for lying and giving us the misinformation that led to the war. I mean, this is a serious, serious crime that was committed. And quite frankly, I think it was not just a mistake, not just misinformation. There were certain people who very, very deliberately wanted to distort the information. We now, fortunately, since the Democrats have been in charge, they have revealed this CIA information that was readily available before the war was started, which said, predicted all the things that some of us were saying anyway, that this would lead to a tragedy and a mess and chaos, and yet that was denied to most of the members of Congress. They never read this. But I think the responsibility falls on the opposition party. I think he's doing the smart thing of doing it at the vice president before the president, because if you get rid of the president, you end up with Cheney. I don't know whether you'd feel any better with that, because Cheney's the one that probably orchestrated this stuff. And if it's proven to be the case, whoever did it should be impeached.
Congressman Paul, we're going to give you the progressive litmus test. We'll try to keep the answers short and go through some ideas. And I'll just come up with some phrases, and you just kind of like what comes out from it. The Iraq hydrocarbon law, is it a good idea? Should we guarantee our investment more?
This is a mess. Let's say I have an idea of what should exist over there eventually, if this war would ever end. But it is difficult to go to that ideal. I mean, I would like oil to be developed the way it was in Texas for a lot of years, and you didn't have the federal government, you didn't have anybody else, and the oil was drilled, and a lot of people became wealthy over it, and there was no abuse. But the way this is being designed, with us having the influence in writing these laws for special interests, I think they're horrible. And but there's no easy answer to that, because how do you go from the transition from the mess we created to turn it over to something a much fairer system? So if I can't get to the free market, which you can't under those circumstances, then you ought to make sure the powerful special interests don't benefit from this war, because they're the ones who helped encourage us to get into the war anyway.
Is it time to stand for the repeal of the Patriot Act?
Absolutely. I've done my very best on that, fought it when it came in, and we fought it in bits and pieces, and yet we thought we were making great progress, but when it came up for renewal, it was more of these things: frightened, scared. If you don't vote for it, you're unpatriotic. There may be another 9/11. You'll be responsible. And they all caved in. But the American people have spoken up pretty loudly against the Patriot Act. And eventually, if we remain a republic and if we remain a free society, we would have to repeal that, because that is certainly moving in the wrong direction.
Equality of opportunity should be afforded to all Americans regardless of race, color, creed, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression.
Yeah, and I would do all that with ignoring all those words, because that means that confuses everything. I think there's only one group that you have to worry about, only one race, and that's the human race. And the individual, every individual deserves rights because they're an individual and not because of their race or gender or anything else. I think that really confuses things. But the main thing is you don't use any force. You can't prohibit people from doing things and denying them rights because they belong to a certain group. But because somebody belongs to a certain group, they can't force themselves on others. So I want a voluntary arrangement. There should be no force used, and no prohibitions.
Government can and must protect Americans from the threat of terrorism without eroding our constitutional liberties. Today, Arab Americans are especially vulnerable to abuses of government power. Are all citizens equal?
They should be, and that's what you should strive for, and we should have equal justice in the court. You never do. Right now, it's pretty aggravating to see that if you happen to kill somebody, but you're very, very wealthy and well known, you may well get off. Compare that to some minority in the inner city who gets caught with cocaine and never committed a violent act, or even smoking marijuana the third time. They might be put in prison for life with no chance of parole and no violent act. So I would say no, there's a great deal of injustice, and that's what we should strive for.
Our security will be enhanced by working with other nations and the UN instead of acting like an empire.
Well, we shouldn't be an empire, but I don't have if I don't have much faith in my federal government because they confuse and mess things up so badly, just think how good a job they did with Katrina and buying all those houses that got wasted. I don't like another level of government. But if we're going to have another level of government, then it should be for talking. It should be helping people who are starving. And we probably can't close down all these international agencies. But what I really object to is us going to the war under the UN. I mean, the UN has caused a great deal of trouble. There were two reasons why we went to war in Iraq. One, to go get those weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. And the other was to enforce UN resolutions. That was the legal, moral justification that Bush was using. And it started off badly. I mean, that's the way the Korean War started. We didn't follow the Constitution and say we had to declare war. We went to war because the UN told us to. And I don't like the WTO coming in and telling us what our tax code should be. So I like national sovereignty. But if you had a United Nations and you weren't going to get rid of it, to talk about trying to help some poor countries of the world and how to negotiate and get along better, that doesn't offend me nearly as much as the war-making powers of the United Nations, because I don't think they've done a very good job in keeping us out of these wars.
Ron Paul, the Progressive Litmus Test. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan, and good luck with your presidential campaign.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
The International News Network report is broadcast television in more than 20 million homes in America. We are non-commercial, non-profit, and we are viewer-supported. That is how we can bring you these kinds of stories and interviews 5 days a week. Keep INN broadcasting. Please go to our website, INNWorldReport.net, and contribute what you can. You can also email us at INNWorldReport@gmail.com. Thanks, Gmail.